Hi, I'm Tom Bentham, and I am presenting for our general meeting a presentation on defending our vote for this election. And I'm an advisory board member with Indivisible Sonoma County. So let's dive right in. Before we actually get into talking about defending our election, we want to highlight that we've got three electoral priorities. Our strategy this year and focus is on taking back the White House, on flipping the Senate, and on expanding our majority in the House of Representatives. All three are critical together to taking back our country and saving democracy, in fact. We've got three different ways to do that, and they are not directly correlated to those goals, but we're showing them against that backdrop. We've got texting. We have three team leaders, Inga, Linda, and Stephanie, who are leading text teams. Texting is a critical way to reach voters. And a really fun way to reach out to voters and get to a lot of people very quickly that way. We are also doing phone banking. So our team leader, Greg Roth, is not leading phone banking sessions, but connecting folks to the myriad of phone banking Zoom meetings and individual phone banking that's possible to do through a variety of different organizers. And so that also in an age when we are not able to go and knock door to door is a critical way of reaching out to voters. And of course, postcarding. Our team leaders, Gloria and Jack, have been madly at work this year and are still going hard for at least the next several weeks with postcarding. Gloria, I think, has sent out over 140,000 cards already this year. So keep those in mind. It's important to do all three, and it's important to do as much of that as we can going into this election. But now we're also going to talk about defending our election. And I want to acknowledge, first of all, that we're not doing this in a vacuum. We're doing it in a really challenging time. The pandemic, which hit in the spring, has been so insanely mismanaged by Trump that we're bearing the brunt of it in a way that no other country in the world actually is. Of course, that's resulted in over 200,000 deaths, most of which were unnecessary. It's also completely hammering our economy for very many people, and it's disrupted our lives. We've been in some level of sequestration ever since, and distancing from each other and disconnect from each other ever since the spring. And if that weren't enough, for those of us living here in the Bay Area or the greater Bay Area, we've had this, and we finally have some clean air now. But we've been going through a lot of this, and there may be more to come in the fall. So with all of that on our plates, I want to acknowledge that it's already tough, and yet we have to deal with this. And Trump and the Republican Party right now they're a threat not just to the well-being of our country, they're a threat actually to our country continuing to be a democracy. That's hanging in the balance. So if you didn't think COVID was scary, if you didn't think the fires and hazardous air were scary, this should be enough to really get you feeling like this. And I know I feel this way a lot. I'm sure a lot of you do, a lot of your friends do. Unfortunately, it's been kind of a commonality for us for some time now, living under the Trump administration. But we do have to, as we're going through this, we've got to find a way to help ourselves be more like this whenever we can. So I'm going to bring us back to trying to find our way back to a sense of calm as we go through this presentation, even though it's a challenging topic. And I do want to acknowledge before we get into this that, trying to have a fair election should be something that we can just take for granted. And the fact that we can't is terrible, but we need to take a deep breath and know that we're going to get through this and we will somehow find a way. So what's the context we're looking at this in? Well, it's that Trump can't win a fair election. He didn't in 2016. He knows he wouldn't this time. What that means is he's going to cheat every way that he can. It's important to realize that he doesn't need one big thing to work. He doesn't need to, hack one thing and then just grab the election that way. He's counting on a lot of little things, or not so little things, but things working together to put him over the top. And failing that, there's every indication that he will cheat after losing to try to stay in office anyway. This is what dictators do. And it's important to realize that that's what we're fighting. We're not dealing with a normal politician. We're not dealing with a normal political party. We're dealing with a person who's already locked in many of the features of a dictatorship. And this is really, I would say, probably our last and best chance right now to pull our country back from the brink. Well, Republicans know this too. They are going to cheat. They're going to cover for Trump, and they're going to cheat for themselves because they want to hold on to their Senate seats. They want to hold on to their House seats and try to claw some House seats back. As I say here, there are no Republicans who are going to do the right thing, who are going to put country before party. There are no appeals to decency, to fairness, to shame, any of that are going to have any effect. Now, someone pointed out that, gee, there must be some Republicans somewhere that are decent people. And of course there are. I'm not talking just about Republican voters or registered Republicans. What I'm talking about are current elected Republican officials. Mitt Romney might be one, but most of the time when you hear somebody saying, well, this isn't right, or we should actually defend our election, or we should have fair voting, you're here, and they're Republican, you're hearing from somebody who used to be a Republican office holder and is no longer the Jeff Flakes of the world or the Paul Ryans of the world, and their chances of getting reelected by actual Republican voters these days are close to zero. So the reason I say this is because for some folks, they've got a persistent hope that maybe now Republicans are going to do the right thing. It's time to give up that hope and plan for them doing exactly what they will do, which is to cheat like crazy. This is who the GOP has become. They're right now a fascist, white nationalist, anti-democracy party. They don't believe in trying to win the most votes fair and square. They believe in doing everything they can to win and seize power and keep it. That means they're a dictator's party. And they are. They're in subservience to somebody who acts like a dictator every single day. And they're controlled by their owners, the Murdochs, Koch, the remaining Koch brother, Putin, and mega donors. So what do? Well, we try to do this. This is one person's map of kind of the best possible outcome for Biden, which is, pretty much running the table, flipping every state that they possibly can blue, really losing only the states that are so diehard Republican, and as you can see, that actually don't have that many electoral votes. Why would we want to do this? Well, to win, of course, but also because when there is cheating going on, this mitigates against it. You can have some loss of votes in some places, but if you do this, it makes it much harder for Trump to argue that he was defeated fair and square. However, we need to look at this in balance. So the electoral map does look really, really good for Biden and Harris and for flipping the Senate. It looks great. In a normal year, that would just be thumbs up, and we'd be working hard, but we'd be smiling a lot too. However, this isn't a normal election, and it probably shouldn't be judged by normal yardsticks because, as I was saying, we're not dealing with a normal opposing political party. We're dealing with a party that's been locking in power illegally for years now. That party, the GOP, is aimed at total domination by using any means at their disposal. They're within a democratic process still, an election, but they're an anti-democracy player. They're trying to keep as many opponents from voting as possible. They're not trying to win. They're working to break it. It'll look like winning, but what they really want to do is break the system and have a final consolidation of power. Now, Rachel Bitkofer is an electoral analysis and pollster. In her summary, she said, Democrats have well over 90% chance of winning, of Biden-Harris winning, of winning across the board. Very, very strong numbers. However, there are some known unknowns, and she lists them and ends up by saying, 2016 was a story of third-party defection and late breakers. There's little issue of that in 2020. Instead, 2020 is going to be a story of whose ballot gets counted. That's the whole enchilada right there. So we have to defend against cheating. Get out the vote alone may not be enough. Let's review the challenges, and please know I'm going to tell you a bunch of challenges here. It's kind of a dire story just because there are a lot of them, and the Republicans are trying really hard, and Trump is trying really hard. I mean, think about it. If he loses, there's a very good chance he's going to prison. So there are a lot of things for us to take stock of, but when we get through these, we're also going to talk about what we can do. So hold out some hope. So there's the old-fashioned GOP cheating. There's gerrymandering, like this district outside of Philadelphia. There's kicking voters off the rolls. They found that something like 60% of voters who've been kicked off the rolls in Georgia for the last election had been done so fraudulently, that they didn't meet the criteria for being taken off the rolls at all. There's disenfranchising people, like the felons in Florida, who just recently found out that even though the public voted for them to be able to be enfranchised and have the vote, the Republican Party kept fighting it and fighting it. And they finally won a court victory where they were able to say, well, yes, in theory, you should be able to vote, but only if you pay all the fees that we've levied on you for being a felon. And by the way, we're probably not going to tell you what those are, so your chances of voting have gone down to almost nil. They close polling places. They use broken equipment or don't fix it in time so that there aren't enough booths, so that lines extend and people either have to wait in line for hours or aren't able to vote, or polls close and they try to turn them away. And we should note that there's evidence of breaches in the integrity of voting machines themselves. This is all old-fashioned GOP cheating. It's pretty bad already, but there's also the new GOP, what I'm calling the dictator's playbook. We've seen this from Trump for years. Let's run through all the myriad ways that this bad stuff is happening. So there's lying. There's using allies in Congress and the Department of Justice to mount bogus investigations of Biden and of Hunter Biden. There's repeatedly lying about the electoral process and the opposition, spreading disinformation. Trump is routinely saying things like, mail-in ballots are fraudulent, so on and so forth. There's using the disinformation to confuse, scare, and to motivate the public. That's us. So if you're confused or scared or demotivated, it's working. While deluding and exciting and enraging their followers. There's amplifying and targeting this disinformation through media and social media. And one of the things right now we're seeing, you may have seen in the news, is there's a campaign in social media to save the children, that children are being sex trafficked, and it's rampant and widespread. And who wouldn't want to reach out and save children, right? This is a gateway campaign for QAnon and the notion that the real sex traffickers are people like George Soros and Hillary Clinton. I mean, it just takes you down a rabbit hole into insane conspiracy theory. And so you really have to watch out for those kind of hooks and people getting lost in that propaganda world. And using corrupted government agencies to spread disinformation and to make false promises. There's cheating. So Trump made a choice to let COVID rage. He deliberately did it. He knew how bad it was. He decided to let it go anyway. Why did he do that? We don't know for sure, but it's the kind of move a dictator would make. It's more dangerous to vote in person. It's harder to recruit poll workers. It increases the likelihood of voting by mail, which then can be disrupted, as we've seen. It actually kills opposition voters. That sounds like a harsh statement, but we know that Jared Kushner looked at the disease, looked at the fact that it was mostly impacting blue states and said, why would we do anything about that? It's just blue states being affected. That's a willingness to kill the opposition. And the danger, pain, and suffering that it causes makes it harder to campaign or to vote. There's cheating by illegally using the power and resources of the presidency to campaign. When Trump shows up in Air Force One for what is supposed to be an announcement and then uses most of the time to talk about his campaign, that's illegal because those are your dollars that are being used to fund his campaign. He's supposed to be acting as president. He's acting as candidate instead. Same thing when he has his press conferences. Same thing in spades when they use the White House for the first time ever to actually host the Republican National Convention. It's the people's house, but he used it as a prop for his campaign. completely illegal. The hundreds of people who were necessary to make that happen were all acting illegally. All could be prosecuted under the Hatch Act if we had a functioning Department of Justice. And every time he breaks the law this way, as I say, he's using your money, which you're paying him or you're paying the government to run the government. He uses it as a free campaign donation. There's cheating using a corrupted Department of Justice to defend Trump and to attack his supposed enemies, potentially to attack the process itself. Barr is, I think, probably the most corrupt attorney general we've ever seen. He is solely Trump's attack dog. He's not doing anything for the country. It's only for the person he believes to be a completely omnipotent autocrat in the White House. They're corrupting and sabotaging federal agencies to serve Trump's reelection. We've seen the post office be corrupted and sabotaged. We've seen the census be told that they have to stop counting early. Department of Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, which is trying to mount a $250 million ad campaign telling you that Trump's COVID response was just great. And the CDC, where we found that political operatives came in and actually put in false information that nobody in the CDC agreed with, telling people that if you were asymptomatic, you didn't need to get tested for the virus. This is just insane. The level of disruption and corruption in federal agencies is off the charts. And of course, it's Trump, so they're using illegal campaign accounting as well. There's cheating by illegally assisting third-party campaigns to make Kanye West and or the Green Party the Jill Steins of 2020 and draw off just enough votes that Trump can win in a few states. And there's the main source of cheating that, well, it was in 2016, the main source of cheating, of asking Russia to actually attack our election. Russia, if you're listening, go right ahead. Trump has welcomed them personally. He has interfered with any efforts to stop them for years. He's hiding or blocking the evidence of their attacks. They won't let the national security apparatus even talk to Congress about the attacks that they're seeing. They're blocking that. They're coordinating with Russia to spread lies and disinformation. If you don't believe me, listen to Senator Ron Johnson, who is a regular font of Russian talking points. And they're ignoring Russia's hacking of our voting systems, which you know happened in 2016, and they surely are poised to do again. And just to wrap up the cheating, there's the potential use of unbadged federal stormtroopers to intimidate voters or otherwise disrupt the election. We've seen this in Kenosha, we've seen it in Portland. They've been kind of previewing that. And there's a possibility that they'll actually foment riots on or before election night and use the Insurrection Act to put them down. Not my imagination, actually something Trump said in an interview a few days ago. As Kellyanne Conway said, for Trump, the more chaos and violence, the better. It's another time for a deep breath, because at this point, I'll note that that just takes us up to Election Day, November 3rd. What about after that? Well, after that, there's the potential, which any good self-respecting dictator would do, of trying to steal the election. So Rosa Brooks assembled experts from both parties as part of the Transition Integrity Project to run scenarios to imagine what might happen in the aftermath of an election, or the election. And she found that, or they found that a landslide for Joe Biden resulted in a relatively orderly transfer of power. Every other scenario we looked at involved street-level violence and political crisis. America's experienced deadlock elections twice before, in 1876 and 2000. The compromise that they reached at the last minute that allowed the inauguration to proceed in 1876 was that they would give up on Reconstruction. So they basically resold Black Americans in the South into a type of bondage under Jim Crow for over 100 years. Well, about 100 years in 1876. That was the price of that compromise. And 2000, I think you remember. That's not the only way to steal the election. This time we might not be so lucky. We might not have a compromise. We may see premature declarations of victory and demanding an end to counting votes. Trump has already telegraphed that, and his subordinates have already telegraphed that that's a strategy they might use. contesting the validity of ballots, like hanging chads, for example, by claiming signatures are invalid would be one way for them to go about doing that. Refusing to concede and just lying about the results. Sounds kind of like Trump's first day in office when he insisted that his crowd size was way bigger for his inauguration than any camera was able to capture. And then, as I mentioned, invoking the Insurrection Act, which allows the president to turn federal troops against the American people to attack or subdue the populace using federal troops. Even a Biden landslide is no guarantee that these will not happen. It's a hedge against them, and a pretty good one. It's not a guarantee. Trump has already threatened most of these actions. And here from a few days ago is a headline saying that Roger Stone said to Trump, you know, even if you lose the election, who cares? Bring in martial law. And in a close election, it can get more dangerous in cases where the results are disputed. Republican legislatures and Democratic governors in states where they have that configuration could each try to send electors for Trump or for Biden to the Electoral College. That's competing slates of electors asking to be recognized and have their votes count. Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Wisconsin all have Republican legislatures and Democratic governors. Note from the picture here that in both Wisconsin and in North Carolina, when an existing Republican legislature had a new Democratic governor, in both cases they tried to take away as much power as they could from that governor in the ensuing lame duck period. So it's not like these guys are committed to playing fair. They're not. But unfortunately, the rules for resolving such a gridlock are ambiguous, and they might be interpreted differently by Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House and Mike Pence as the acting president of the Senate, each of whom might be seen as responsible for making the decision. So that's kind of potential sticky situation. And while we're on stealing, a disputed result could be sent to the Supreme Court to decide, as it was in 2000. So some have speculated that the court might see the issue as fundamentally political rather than judicial and decline to intervene. What do you think? Finally, of course, Trump may just decide to unleash violence using the Department of Justice, ICE, CBP troops that he's already assembled and unleashed in Portland and Kenosha and other places. Or he could incite supporter militias and dare anyone to try to stop him. This picture is of a militia that invaded the State House in Michigan not long ago to protest the fact that people were being asked to wear masks to save lives. Yikes. I mean, this is the end of the list, but if you're not feeling like this, I'm surprised. I think we all feel like this a lot. My apologies for taking you through this long and difficult and challenging list of things, but it's important that we be informed. It's important that we be aware. And being informed and aware, we also need to help ourselves to move to an attitude that's going to help us more get through this. And let's talk about one way to do that and take on a new attitude by asking ourselves, what can we do? Let's find out. So first, take a breath. Take a breath. Remember through all this that fear and chaos benefit Trump. He wants you, he wants all of us to be afraid and upset because that unsettles you, makes it hard to think, makes it hard to work, makes it hard to do everything. Take a breath. Let go of that to the extent that you can. Do what you can to stay calm and clear and positive. Let's note that Biden and Harris have a strong lead in the polls. Most Americans are sick of Trump. They desperately want him out. You're not alone. If we knew that this was going to be just a free and fair election, that would be great news. It's still really good news. But we're talking about this so we can be prepared. So let's use that energy to do everything in our power. Yes, even texting and calling people if you haven't done that before, to make sure that we create an overwhelming blue wave. So I'm going to talk here about things that we can do. And I want to note that I'm doing it for a couple of reasons. One is that it's really important, as I said, to be informed of the possibility of ways that the election can be compromised or that your vote can be compromised. It's really important because we need to protect against that. But awareness is the first step in being able to protect. If If you don't know what's going on, it's harder to do anything about it. I want to note that we live here in a deep blue district in a deep blue state. So even though I'm going to be talking about protecting your vote, it's probably not going to be that critical for you, but it may be critical for people that you know, friends, family, who live in swing states or other areas where their vote being compromised is a much greater possibility. And frankly, if there's swing states where that compromise may have a real effect on the election in a way that it might not in California. So being aware, using that awareness to alert others is a critical part of being able to actually defend ourselves. And then finally, it's really important as an aware voter to be able to tell your representatives, we need you to protect us. And as an aware citizen, to be able to call out to others and ask for them to continue to protect the election as well. So we're going to talk about that. So after taking a breath and chilling a little bit, the next thing to do is to secure your vote. If you decide to vote by mail, apply as soon as you can. And actually here you're going to get a ballot. But if allowed in your county, and again, these recommendations are for anyone across the country. So if they don't apply specifically to you, take them in so that you understand ways to protect your vote, even if you're your relative in Florida or Ohio or Georgia or wherever they might be, Wisconsin, right? So if you decide to vote by mail, apply as soon as possible, and if allowed in your county, return your ballot, preferably in person at a drop box or office, not via the post office, because the post office is being sabotaged and suffering delays due to the pandemic. Sign the envelope, and it's really important to follow the instructions exactly so that the ballot won't be rejected. If you vote in person, bring your ID, and this is important, bring your completed sample ballot. It's going to speed up voting, no matter what type of voting system you use. If you vote in person, request to vote with a ballpoint pen on a hand-marked paper ballot rather than a touch screen, because most experts agree that hand-marked paper ballots are more reliable and secure. Moreover, many new touchscreen systems put voter selections into barcodes, which we can't read. And even though they put some small human readable text beneath the barcode, it doesn't always, well, something like 98% of people never actually look at that to make sure that the results are correct. So it's possible that the selection can be flipped within the machine, that it can be altered in some other way, or it could be an error. But there's no way to, there's no clear, apparent way for most voters to look at that and say, okay, this is the vote that I meant to take. It's an extra step. So if you do have to work with a touch screen, take time to take that extra step and make sure it's capturing your vote the way you intended. Do that by comparing the human readable text on the paper to your completed sample ballot to ensure that the machine didn't drop or flip your vote as reflected. Again, very few voters will notice this on their own. So if you've got a friend or family member in another state, make sure to alert them. Down ballot races are really important. It's not just important to elect Biden-Harris and to flip the Senate. Races at every level make a huge difference. They make a difference here too, but especially in states with Republican legislatures, this year is critical, because if we can flip some of those state races, then that affects redistricting and can impact the gerrymandering that will go on if Republicans are allowed to continue to set those guidelines, which happens once every 10 years. So this is our chance for the next decade. Also, state races are key because the GOP has a long-standing desire to convene an Article 5 convention of states to rewrite the US Constitution. And we don't want that to happen. Confirm your voter registration several times between now and the election. Save a screenshot of the registration as proof. If you have any problems or questions voting, you can contact the Voter Protection Hotline at this number. If you do have problems when you're voting at a poll, or if someone you know does, it's important to report the problem to poll workers and to local media and on social media. You can tag Jenny Cohn. Her Twitter handle is here. And she's the one, by the way, who's compiled this list of ways to protect your vote. We're very grateful to her for doing that work. And she can then spread that news wider. What else can we do? We can secure the polls. So you can volunteer to be a poll worker. We need reliable in-person voting to handle the hundreds of thousands of voters who don't receive their mail ballots on time or who prefer to do in-person voting. Republicans would love to close polling locations because of a worker shortage. If you know youth would like to volunteer, maybe at less risk for coronavirus, have them visit the amazing youth-led pollhero.org to sign up. What else can we do? We can secure everyone's vote. We also need poll observers to help prevent and report voter intimidation and other problems at the polls. And we need observers for counting the absentee ballots. Trump reportedly has plans to deploy 50,000 monitors. We need more than that. You can volunteer as a poll worker or a watcher through your state or county political party and encourage people to sign up if you can. We want to secure the ballots. We want to make sure that there are paper poll books in ballots because electronic poll books often connect to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and are prone both to failure and can be hacked. They should also, or we should also demand, here it's not an issue, but in, if you have friends in other states, demand that people are given hand-marked paper ballots. And then there are election officials in some jurisdictions who are using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to use e-poll books to encode the activation cards that activate hackable touchscreen voting machines. That's placing our election at risk. It's actually the results of the election that could be hacked. We should have backup paper for everything. Also, polling places are consolidated so that voters can vote at any county center. It's going to be impossible to have backup paper poll books. And they're going to have to use hackable electronic poll books. You can talk to your county election board about that. This is a picture of our last primary here in California in Los Angeles. This is what a vote center looks like when electronic poll books fail, and we cannot afford to have this happen. So it's not like living in California makes you immune to these kind of problems. What else can we do? Well, the swing states of Florida, Michigan, and Wisconsin installed cellular modems, which connect to the internet. These are folks that were hacking into our systems in 2016. And election officials in Florida are also deleting and destroying digital ballot images, which means that you don't have a backup. So all of those are again, critical gaps we need to guard against. We can secure ballots by considering volunteering with protectourvotes.com to photograph precinct totals as shown on precinct poll tapes that are posted outside many polling places when the polls close and comparing them to the county reported totals for those precincts. If the two don't match, this suggests that a potentially serious problem occurred with the tabulation and it may support an election challenge. We can secure the ballots by taking screenshots of results as they come in on election night. So you can watch and can record the results on the Secretary of State or county websites throughout the night. Take screenshots about every 5 minutes, save them as you go, and make sure that they're time stamped. And those web results, if they change in the wrong direction, may signify an anomaly that can provide the basis for an electoral challenge. So that's critical. Again, you can notify Jenny Cohn if you see that. And so that's Okay, the last piece of this is that we need to demand transparency and the willingness to fight. So there's a picture of Joe during the primary debates. He looks like he's saying, now hold on just a minute here. But we also know Joe in the primary debates was willing to stop himself short in the middle of a sentence when he realized that his time was up, and that the fighting behavior will serve him well. This election, the willingness to be so polite that you stop yourself is exactly the kind of behavior we want to guard against. We need to demand transparency. It needs to be clear that the vote was fair. It's not that we want to contest all results, but we want to know for sure what happened so we can see it. That's part of the reason for not connecting the modems and connecting to the internet. Transparency means that we need to be able to investigate. We need to be able to have manual recounts or manual audits. If there are unexpected election losses or ones that look particularly fishy, we cannot let our candidates play dead if they lose unexpectedly and under suspicious circumstances. As Jenny Cohn's short video said, Russia had the ability not only to hack voter rolls, but to actually hack vote results in 2016. If they had that ability then, they sure as heck have it now. We cannot allow them to go in and actually just change the totals in a way to help Trump win. Once again, thank you to Jenny Cohn for these vote protection tips. You can ask us and we'll send you a link to her article, which has all of them, so you don't have to watch this presentation several times. And we ask you to please share that widely. And we do another pause to remind ourselves to regain our poise. This is a lot of stuff to deal with and trying to protect our ballots to make sure that they're fairly counted and fairly tabulated so that we actually have a free and fair election. Regain our poise, think blue wave, and let's look at a few other ways to defend against cheating. So what can we do pre-election? We can defend against cheating by demanding that your House representatives shine a light on the cheating and corruption with constant hearings and public statements now. So we only have a few weeks until the election. This isn't something that can wait. This is how we get the media to pay attention. So Democrats sometimes act as if the media is going to pick up on something because it's an important story and that's enough. No, they don't do that. They actually pick up on stories because somebody's making a fuss. When Democrats don't make a fuss, the media, both sides, the coverage, nobody finds out anything happened. It's really important that if there are threats to, when there are, because we've seen that there are a lot of threats right now coming from Trump and the Republicans, when there are threats to a free and fair election, that Democrats speak up in public and that they exercise in a very vigorous way their oversight capabilities by calling hearings immediately. And if people don't show up for subpoenas, start to punish them, hold them accountable, hold them in contempt. Most of our other institutions are failing, right? If it's a part of the administration right now, it's been corrupted or it's actively failing. The House has to do better than they have been at opposing folks. And we asked Mike Thompson last week about the election. He said, you know what? Trump is going to cheat every way he possibly can in this election. And when I asked Mike, what are you doing about it? He told me about 3 pieces of legislation that he had passed, or that the House had passed that he had voted for. Now, 2 of those are never going to make it to the Senate floor, or one is never going to make it to the Senate floor. The other one is not going to make it to the Senate floor in the form that he voted for it. And the other one, the money's basically run out. That's not an effective way to fight back against cheating. We need to ask them to use their voices, use their oversight, not legislation. Should be asking themselves, what would Katie Porter do? We can defend against normalizing. We can demand that the media distinguish between the truth and lies or disinformation. Lots of times they like to just both sides it. Well, the Republicans said this, well, the Democrats said that, and pretend that truth doesn't exist. Well, when one side is lying and the other side is telling the truth, it's obligatory for the press to actually say so. And we need to ask them not to normalize the corruption of the government in this election. These are not normal times. This is not a president in anywhere remotely like the normal sense of the term. Pretend that he is makes it kind of like the emperor's new clothes. Like There's nothing to see here. It's just a normal election, and these guys are just campaigning. And hey, guess what? Who's ahead? You can fight back against this by calling or writing letters to the editor, or you can unsubscribe. Their coverage really needs to be about both the electoral process. If Trump's attacking the election, that needs to be covered, not just whether it was a savvy campaign move. And to defend against normalizing, here's some good folks to follow. Jay Rosen at NYU, Dan Frimkin with Press Watchers, Brian Beutler at Crooked.com, and Margaret Sullivan, who writes about media matters at the Washington Post, are all excellent people for keeping an eye on the press. We can tell the truth. So you can call out lies, conspiracy theories, and disinformation on social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. You can complain to them and ask them to take disinformation down immediately. If you do that, avoid amplifying lies by passing them around in outrage. That just makes the lies grow stronger. It's important to realize you've got a good tool for this. You can use George Lakoff's truth sandwich technique. The way you do that is you start with the truth. The first frame gets the advantage. So start with the truth, say that first. Indicate the lie. Avoid amplifying the specific language if possible. So don't quote Trump exactly. Indicate what it was he said. Trump was saying that he didn't think mail-in ballots. Well, you could say even it's voting by mail is completely safe and reliable, and it's been done for years by many states. Trump has been saying that it's not safe. That's wrong. It's completely safe and it's completely reliable, and there's no evidence to prove otherwise. So that's returning to the truth and always repeating truths more than lies. Use this incessantly, because otherwise you risk just making the lies grow larger. Spread the truth. Talk to friends, neighbors, and family about the myriad ways Trump and his allies are failing us and cheating. And you can work to dispel that disinformation by telling the truth instead. Spread that on social media, amplify that. And don't forget to talk about what Biden, Harris, and other great candidates get right. We can set expectations. So also with the media, Will Bunch of the Philadelphia Inquirer says, TV and other media should agree to resist pressure to declare a winner in the first 24 hours after the polls close, and to develop a plan to cooperate on when and how each state victor is announced. They could even agree to issue a nightly state of the vote count in a joint communique. Why would they do this? Well, part of the reason is that the vote may not be decided by the end of the night on November 3rd. It's entirely possible, with more people voting by mail in this election, that it will take a while to count the ballots. We didn't have some races in California in 2018 decided until weeks after the election. That degree of patience, of being willing to count every ballot, is going to be necessary. We need the media to help us let the public know that that's going to be the case, and to keep things calm, to help set expectations. Part of the reason for this presentation is you also can help set those expectations when you talk to other folks. We can head off conflict. Marco Rubio, of all people, has a bill to extend the safe harbor period for votes to be counted from December 8th to January 1st, which would be a great idea. Right now, they have to be counted so they can be sent, electors can be sent to the Electoral College by December 8th. Extending that period would be very helpful this year, especially because of the pandemic. We could create a bipartisan commission to guide resolution of disputes. Not sure that that would come about, but it's possible. And military and law enforcement officers can issue clear statements in advance about what they will or won't do to resist political pressure to act. I have to say, personally, I have a lot of faith in many of the police departments around the country, given their behavior the last few months, but to the extent that we can push for this, we certainly should. And finally, we can join together. Right? We can join Protect the Results, which is a consortium of different organizations, including Indivisible, who are vowing to mobilize voters if Trump refuses to accept the election results. I definitely recommend that you join Protect the Results right away. We can be prepared to nonviolently march, to demonstrate, to disrupt, and strike. If things, if Trump really pulls out all the stops, this is something that we are going to have to be prepared to do. Prepare to refuse to accept a stolen election and be prepared to resist it at all costs. This picture is from Belarus, where they had severely interfered with election, and the results of which were not fair. They're asking for a re-election, and it's still a fight for them. And this is a picture of them demonstrating, but you can easily find pictures of people being beaten and jailed, and so the cost of this will be very high. But if we want to save our country, it may be the step that we have to take. So, speaking of steps, what the heck do we do next? Where do we go from here? Well, there are 3 things you can do tomorrow morning. First is you can tell 2 friends something important that you learned from this talk. Pass the information on and ask them to tell 2 friends each, with bonus points if they live in a swing state or somewhere where their vote really might be compromised. You can call or email your members of Congress and demand that they use the powers of oversight and public speaking. These are the powers we invested in them to help protect our election. Oversight and public speaking, not legislation, to limit Trump's ability to cheat right now. They need to do it right now. And join Protect the Results, protecttheresults.com. And of course, you can make calls, you can write postcards, you can send texts. So we do this on November 3rd or in the weeks following as the votes are counted. Great. Thanks so much for listening. Let's go out and defend our election. It's time to get to work. Thank you.